Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the next installment, the unending saga, so it seems, of our look at Worlds Without Number, specifically their campaign creation tools. I don't have any particular programming notes to share today. Sword Timber continues apace, though I still have to typeset the latest Sword Timber text and art for that. I did post a little freebie. You can check it out in the community tab or elsewhere. Just a little fun little image that had 6 swamp encounters on it, so you can check that out if you want. Again, I don't really have anything to say, so let's not dilly-dally. Let's get to it. Today, we shall look at creating social challenges. We're going to get social, people. Let's do it. In many ways, social challenges are extremely simple. The PCs want something, the NPC has it, and the PCs need to figure out some way to make the NPC give it to them. They may want favors, information, money, or some particular action on the target's part, but it's essentially a challenge revolving around making the transaction. All right, so he's essentially defining our terms here. We're looking at social challenges as a sort of a combat, a bargain, if you will. PCs want something. It could be a lot of things. NPC has it. They're not fighting about it. They're trying to negotiate. Social challenge is that negotiation. Pretty simple. And I think it's key here that they really look at the challenge aspect. We don't need to do this for everything we do on a social basis. This is really about when there is some kind of transaction or potential transaction at stake. You don't have to pull this out every time the PCs run into somebody and they just want to talk them up. But as soon as maybe that talk turns from, hey, how you doing? Tell me about your hometown, to specific things that you just determine the NPC maybe doesn't want to give them, is reticent to give them, or maybe the NPC decides I can extract something for that, then you might want to flip to running it as this kind of social challenge as opposed to just free-flowing role-playing. So the first subheader here is building the target. A social challenge has a target, a particular person that the PCs need to persuade or compel into doing something for them. If you're making a good challenge out of the matter, you need to build a target that can sensibly respond to the often exotic persuasions the PCs tend to offer to NPCs. Answer the questions below to fashion this target. So here are the questions. Is the desired result possible? This is a big one, and I'm glad they put it right up front. Too often you see GMs seem to fall into this trap of the PCs asking for something ridiculous. They'll roll a die roll, and the PC will just roll that 20. And if, of course, in 5th edition, Zari will spawn the whole argument of should a PC get a critical success on a skill check. Rules as written says no. A lot of people play it a little more loosey-goosey and say yes. But ultimately, if you allow them to go forth with this, then you end up giving them something that you didn't mean to, didn't even know was on the table, didn't think was on the table because they asked for something wild and crazy. The reality is, and I do try to let my players know, if their PC goes to the king and says, hey, king, give me your kingdom, there's no roll to make. And even if I was going to roll, I might be rolling for, does the king take it as a joke? Or do they take serious offense? And that's when he snaps his fingers for the guards to come. The outcome of you asking the king for his kingdom is never going to result in the king handing over the keys to the castle to you. It's just not on the table. Do the PCs want something that the target even can or would possibly be able to provide? What they want might just be beyond the power of the NPC or so hateful to them they'd never grant it. If that's the case, you either need to telegraph this to the PCs and prepare alternate material for when they give up, or else you need to provide a lead to some action or motivation that might change the situation enough to make the result possible. I mean, this is also true, but I think sometimes you have to keep in mind that some things just might not be possible. What could you do to make the king give you the kingdom? You either have to bring enough force to compel them to do it, I don't know if there'd be a special favor out there. I suppose you could create them, but I'm okay with some things being just, hey, you know what? It's not in the cards. You got to find, if you're going to ask them that, it's an insult. So you'd better tone down what you're looking for, figure out something else, or just go with the consequences. But if it is something that maybe is just outside their reach or just something that they're not willing to do, sure, you can definitely try to help the party figure out what direction to take to get there. The next question is, why won't they give it? Why won't the NPC simply grant the result for the asking or for some easily paid price? If a modest bribe is enough to get the result the PCs want, you haven't made much of a social challenge. That might be okay for you, but you need to know it before the PCs breeze past it. Knowing why the NPC won't cooperate easily helps inform the next step. And then I'm just going to cover these in sort of one thing, right? So the next step is, what do they want from the PC? So we have two related things. Why won't they just give it up for either for nothing or for something easy, readily available to the PCs? And then, of course, what do they want? So you say to the guard, hey, if you let me in the back door of the keep, I'll give you a couple gold pieces. If the guard just rolls over, you probably have questions about that guard. Do they really value their life and their livelihood for just a couple gold pieces? Alternatively, you want to look at it and say, no, this guard's not going to just let them in. But then you might think, well, why might they? Or what would be enough? My wife likes to play these games sometimes. She'll just say, we're walking by the river and it's winter. How much would it take for you to jump in the river? And that's a good question to ask. How much would it take? What would it cost? What would I have to pay to get you to do this thing, which might be hazardous to you, dangerous, or just something unpleasant? So think about that. What do they want? And I think you'd probably want to establish things that are somewhat actionable. It's no fun if they want something you can't give them, right? It's more fun if it might be difficult or time consuming, but it's something that at least in some sense they can do. What kind of favor, payment, or service do they want from the heroes that would make their desired result possible? What kind of problem does the NPC have that the PCs can plausibly resolve? It may be that nothing the PCs can do can satisfy the NPC, in which case a less equitable form of persuasion is needed, right? So if the guard is loyal and you can't get in that way by trying to schmooze them, then maybe you have to lean more on intimidation or other things. Then you lean into, do you have to do something nasty? Like say, I know your wife Edith and your daughter Judith are at home right now eating their gruel. How do I know? Because I've got guys stationed out there, and if you don't let us in, I'm going to send out a little whistle, and you'll find their heads in their beds before you get home, right? So you can't get them by honey. You may have to turn to the lash. What can the PCs do to pressure them? What levers can the PCs pull to force the NPC to cooperate? Blackmail, old friendships, naked physical force, or some other squeeze might be enough to force the NPC into accepting terms they would never consider otherwise. Yep. It's pretty much exactly what I just said. How can they hurt the PCs? What qualities do they have that would make their enmity dangerous? Are they personally mighty in their combat prowess? Do they have a lot of friends at court? Are they connected with the criminal underworld? If the PCs get their way through pressure and don't intimidate the NPC so completely as to make them swear off further contact, there will likely be consequences from the NPC's enmity, which I think is also good, right? Don't forget about that guy. They threaten the guard. They threaten his family to get into the keep. The guard's not going to forget that. And if they don't seem like they're going to be an ongoing threat, or the NPC thinks, maybe I don't believe you. Yeah, you got their names. Maybe I send somebody home and they come back saying, no, all is well, and they didn't find anybody else. Or you have them say, the old TV or movie trope of someone running and telling the wife and child, go to your sisters, don't come until I call you, kind of thing. And then the PCs are in the keep mucking about. Maybe that guard comes back and says, all right, now I'm going to raise the alarm, or I'm going to go tell somebody else, or maybe I'll just wait and get them on their way out, right? Some kind of consequence for that. None nothing. Welcome. This intro stuff would be a good thing for players to read about how they should run social encounters. Yeah, I mean, yes, the doors swing both ways, you could say, so to speak, on social encounters. I think it's definitely good for the PCs to think about these questions. I think often the way it's framed here, right, is that the PCs are going into this because of stuff they need for the adventure they're setting up. In a real sandbox, they might just be out mucking about trying to see what they can get, panhandling in a sense, or just, how far can I get out of that? So they might not have a goal. But yeah, it's never bad, I think, for the PCs to read this stuff. And I don't know if in this book it's more pitched as GM advice, but I think oftentimes GM advice is good for the players to keep in mind. It's good for the players to think about, what do they want? What are they going to get? Asking the right questions. Can I get that? What kind of consequences do I know will come if I get that? Right? What are the downsides? If I go into the king's chambers and say, "Give me your kingdom," what kind of downsides am I aware of? Right? They're good questions to ask. You may not get all the answers to it, but it's good to ask. So we had, how can they hurt the PCs? And then how will the PCs learn about them? Social challenge only works if the PCs know who they need to persuade. A particular crime boss might be the woman they need to win over. But if the PCs never hear about her, there's not much point in prepping the challenge. Be generous about throwing hooks to the target, because the real meat of the challenge happens after they meet. MEET in that case. So the idea here is, of course, they have to be able to find them. If you make these NPCs that you want the PCs to interact with impossible to find, then there's no encounter. It's the old, how do we know the legends of the Black Pearl if nobody ever survived an encounter with the Black Pearl? Someone's got to get out and tell the story so somebody knows. Somebody has to know the crime boss, or know how to get a hold of the crime boss. They got to know which phone booth to go into and what number to call to get the A-team. Somebody has to know something. Hey, Terrence, meat. Exactly. That lovely meat. So yeah, do not overlook the necessity of your players having to have their PCs actually find these contacts. The next section is handling social skills. A PC built for smooth talking and golden persuasion should feel as good about their character choices in a social fray as a warrior does in a melee. Their skills should give them a distinct advantage, but just like a warrior, bare rolls shouldn't save them from bad judgment. And that's a nice way to put it. I like that turn of phrase. Bare rolls shouldn't save them from bad judgment. The fact that you might be playing a bard with a silver tongue doesn't mean that if you, the player, have them go down a path that is foolish, that they shouldn't pay for their foolishness. And the fact that you roll well isn't going to save you from that. Right? It's your brain commanding the action. You are telling them how to harness their talents. If you tell them to harness it in the wrong ways, they're going to get burned. And you can't just roll a die and hand wave that away. There's no, I rolled a 20, so nothing bad can happen to me, right? Wrong. If you rolled a 20 and that 20 was about threatening the king to give out that kingdom to you, then sorry, that doesn't save you from the fact that you made some very poor judgment in your choice of topics. Make sure the rest of the party isn't left out of any negotiations. Every PC should be invited to give their own 2 cents at each stage. Don't penalize PCs who have players that might not be the most socially adroit. Assume whatever they say or do is taken in the spirit intended, even if it is expressed inelegantly. And this is a good point. And to this point, I usually will say, you don't have to speak in the voice of your PC if you're not comfortable, but you can give me the bullet points. These are what I want to hit. I'm trying to leverage my knowledge of courtly custom to impress upon the king how much I feel for the kingdom, and therefore use that feeling so that they should see me as somebody they could trust to tell me whatever, right? I haven't put the exact words in my character's mouth, but I have stated the kind of tools they're using, how they're trying to spin things, and I'm trying to be persuasive. I'm trying to lean on history and culture and custom. Those I think you can do. I don't think there's any argument at that point as well, but I don't have, me, the player, doesn't have 18 charisma, so I can't possibly speak. Well, I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to, your your character will do what they do. I'm asking you to give me the underlying sentiment. And I think that you should be able to, as a player, you should be able to do that. And I think it's also a good point that all the PCs should be allowed in. That's why when the couple times where I've tried to do a sort of a social challenges as combat, I had basically a social initiative. And this forced not only different players to put them and put their characters in the spotlight when maybe the king turns to you, right? The bard steps up and they start talking in flowery language, but for whatever reason, the cleric catches the king's eye, and the cleric hushes the bard and says, "Hey, I want to hear from you, right? What do you have to say?" And I think that also means that you can't necessarily always count on the silver-tongued person to go first. They might go first more often. You could make an initiative roll and use charisma instead of dexterity to say who kind of gets out in front, which would definitely put the emphasis on the more charismatic characters, obviously. But there's still that chance that somebody who's not particularly charismatic, for whatever reason, they're the one that they catch attention somehow, and they go first. And I like to mix it up. That way there's not necessarily the one person always gets the step to the fore. Just like in combat, the warrior doesn't always go first. Sometimes it might be the magic user. Sometimes it might be the rogue. Sometimes it might be someone else. That's just kind of the luck of things. And I like to keep that luck in the social encounters and not just have it be the party spokesman steps to the fore and gets to set the tone. Okay, when the PCs make their request, the target will usually then refuse them or demand a particular favor. At this point, most players will want to roll their social skills to persuade them otherwise or sweeten the terms. Every player who makes such a roll needs to explain what reasons or terms their PC is giving to persuade the target. What do they offer in exchange? Only after they've made their pitch should they roll the check. Now, if you are not running skill checks, you really have to rely on fictional positioning. What are they offering? Have they said what kind of tone they're offering it in? And of course, you can have a little dialogue with your players of say, okay, you were mentioning the culture. How are you mentioning it? Are you mentioning it in a positive way? Oh, the almighty king, you have been the keeper of all the great customs of our people. You've kept them alive. You have paid for all the festivals. You've done all this stuff. This is great, right? That would be persuasion more. You are just trying to pump them up. Maybe more in an intimidating approach would be to castigate them. You haven't kept up the rituals. In the times of our fathers, the temples were never such a sorry state as they are now. Look at the people who are looking elsewhere. You've let them down, coming at it kind of negatively. These are important. So you try to put that stuff together, and then you want to think about where this NPC is. If you want to roll a charisma check, if you want to roll an intelligence check or wisdom, or however you want to do it, you can. But I tend to try to see that fictional positioning first. And I usually will reserve the dice for when I just don't know how they're going to take it, which might come up. In this case, it might be where the king is, and I don't know whether going positive or negative might be the better approach. The character chooses negative. Maybe at that point I'll make a roll. And if the PC is charismatic, that will sort of tilt it in their favor, right? Where if they're not, then they might do it more clumsily, which will tend to tilt against them. Maybe. But I try to lean on how I feel that NPC would react as much as I can. If there's nothing there, there's nothing there, in which case I'll roll. But it seems pretty clear from this that I'm guessing World Without Number, the native mechanical system here, has some kind of skill check. Skill system. I'm going to skip over the difficulty stuff because they're using a difficulty rating, right? So you're going to set the difficulty, and the numbers, unless you're using World Without Number, aren't going to be particularly meaningful. And since we're looking at these as more as generic usage as opposed to in their system, it doesn't really matter. You can add modifiers. If you're going to use a roll under attribute type check, you can modify it as needed. And then let's see. On a success, the NPC either accepts the terms outright or adds a condition that they think the PCs can reasonably accomplish. If the PCs can meet the terms that they offered, they'll get what they want from the NPC, barring treachery. On a failure, the NPC either refuses them flatly or demands some terms that the PCs may not be able to meet. In this case, however, don't simply kill the negotiation. Instead, offer the PC some hint or clue as to potential ways to pressure the NPC or change the grounds of their refusal. So on a success, maybe they'll add a condition, maybe they'll take whatever's offered. On a failure, they're going to ask for something potentially much harder for the PCs to do, maybe something they would even consider it impossible for the PCs to do. And then maybe we should hint to the players in some way, the king is frothing mad at this. It's almost sputtering. Maybe that would lead the players to reverse tax. If they went negative, maybe that same PC or another PC can come in and try to ameliorate things by talking about the positive things that the king has done and try to get it back. Obviously, the PCs can then also counter offer with something better, make some other try to kind of change. I think the NPCs should almost always add a condition. I mean, look, not if you're in a merchant's shop, but maybe even in a merchant shop, right? That no one takes the first offer. Oh, I'll give you 50 gold for it, and the PCs go 75, right? And then the NPC goes 60, right? You want that back and forth, but maybe you might hint that if it's positive, that they're on the right track, kind of thing. Whereas on a failure, right, instead of asking for something reasonable but just a little bit outside what the PCs want, it's I forget the guy's name in the Silmarillion, right? Asking Baron for he wants to marry his daughter or be his daughter, and the guy says, King Thingol says, "Go get the Silmaril that's on Morgoth's crown." Right? That is just a crazy, you should fail, and of course he was fated to succeed. But point was that was one of those impossible sort of requests. He obviously Baron failed his check, and Thingol said, "All right, I'll give you something to do, and something that's clearly impossible," but they made it possible. A failed social negotiation should almost never end in a simple, okay, I think I already read that. All right. Let's see. They may decide that the effort is too onerous, or they may attempt and fail, but they should never be left with nowhere to go, right? Give them something. Give them some kind of next step. In a sense, of saying fail forward, right? If at the end of the day you and the king or whomever cannot come to an agreement, it shouldn't just be a blockage. There should be some other element. It doesn't. I don't think it always has to be another social negotiation, because maybe you say, okay, the guard's not letting us in the back door of the castle, but there are other ways into the castle. It may be that you just have to look at the problem, whatever the problem is that the social negotiation is part of, and say, okay, well, we couldn't get in this way. Maybe we get in another way. Maybe we need to watch this guard for a while so that we can get the ammunition we need to come back and give them an offer they can't refuse, so to speak. But you want to make sure there's something else there. If it's a situation in which the only way into this thing is, it's the side of a mountain and there's one door, and this guard who is godlike is in front of the door, well, then you better give them some kind of option to be able to get through there if you expect them to get through. Otherwise, they make the wrong offer, or they just maybe roll poorly if you do have them roll, and you've just blocked them from all progress. So don't do that. I mean, it's never a good idea to do that anyway. All right, now we're on to one roll social challenge targets. We've seen these tables before. I'm just going to rip through the tables. I'll give some examples, as is my wont. We've got tables titled, How do the PCs learn about them? Why won't they cooperate? What's their weakest point? What's their current mood? What do they want accomplished? And a twist to the negotiation. So, of course, if you don't need these, you don't need to roll them. It's merely if you need the inspiration, if you're caught unawares or by surprise. The what's their current mood is essentially a reaction roll, so to speak. How do they feel? Are they feeling good? Feeling badly? You could do it as morale, either way. If you want to look at reaction, it's kind of how do they feel towards the PCs. If you want to do it as morale, it's how they're feeling generally. This seems to be more of a general feeling. They're happy, it's normal, they're irritated, or they're upset. How did the PCs learn about them? Through a mutual acquaintance. They're a widely known name. They did something noticeable to the PCs, etc., etc. Why won't they cooperate? They got something else they're absorbed by. They're being watched by a rival. They want more of the PCs than the PCs can give. They're afraid of the consequences. They doubt their ability. And notice that these things in the why won't they cooperate are kind of actionable things, right? If they're being absorbed by other issues, they can't really deal with this right now, then that means that the PCs can then offer to deal with those other issues. You have to make them aware of it. Maybe you have the NPC say something like, with all this going on with the planning, the wedding, I can't get involved in this other thing. So then the PCs could go, oh, really? Well, what's a matter with planning the wedding? Maybe we can help you with that, and then you can help us with this, right? If there's a rival, oh, that guard's bothering you, we'll take care of them, then you can help us. So it's a good idea to look at these and not just backstory or background things, but things that the PC should be able to act upon if and when you surface it to them. What's their weakest point? Someone's already blackmailing them. They're enamored of a manipulator. They're a coward. They're in debt. They made a grave error of judgment recently. They're overconfident, stuff like that. What do they want accomplished? They want someone murdered. They want to discredit a rival. They want to help a friend or ally who's in trouble. They want a mystery solved. They want a monster slain, stuff like that. And then what kind of twist do we have? They're planning on reneging on the deal. They misunderstand what the PCs want. They'll somehow think the PCs betrayed them. They have a reason to want to make the deal, right? There's a motive. They have their own motive. They might come across the PCs as being essentially disinterested, but secretly they want this deal to go through as much as the PCs do, maybe for reasons that are ultimately against the PC's interest if the PCs discover it. Someone's tracking them, meaning that rival, or whoever might be watching them is now watching the PCs. PCs have been put on the blacklist, whatever the watch list. Things of that sort. All right. Now we get to a full other subchapter. Are we out of... That was social challenges. I'm just curious here. What do we have? All right. So I guess this is a short section, and it seems worthwhile. Rewards, renown, and experience points. The room stocking rules seen earlier explain how to divide up an adventure treasure, but how much should you be giving in the first place? How many experience points should the heroes get for an adventure, and how much renown should you parcel out for their deeds? All right, so they have their own... Looks like their own... I don't know how their experience are going to compare to my default of BX OSR experience points. Now, I can't tell from the numbers. I'm not so well versed to be able to look at this because they have a chart for patrons and rewards, which actually seems pretty good. Maybe let me read the intro text of this first. So first we have monetary rewards and payment. Adventurers tend to be hired by patrons to do dangerous or unpleasant tasks. The table below gives a general benchmark of various kinds of average patrons can afford to pay for a job that's important to them. I see. Okay, so this isn't an XP. Okay, it's SP. I should have looked at that first. All right, so I like this. It's just a simple table of essentially the wealth level of the patron and the reward you might be able to expect. So it's a peasant. 50 silver is going to probably be what you're going to get. That even seems kind of high, but maybe they've saved up months or years worth of their very meager earnings to try to get this job done because it means that much to them. Prosperous farmer or artisan will be able to pay 300. A village head or tribal chief will maybe get to 500. Peddlers or minor traders will be back down to 300. A rural priest or abbot will offer 1,000. A comfortable merchant will also offer 1,000. A minor mage, 2,500. And so on and so forth, up till you get to monarchs or merchant princes that will offer 50,000. And if you're paid in land or goods and not cash, you can double the values. If there's great danger or desperate need, that might also double the values. And then if they super need to get done, it's just do or die for them, you can get quadruple the values. So you might look at it and say, okay, the common peasant give you 50 silver. But if he pays you in, let's say, wool, because that's what he is, he's a sheep herder, and he does the wool, gets wool off the sheep, then you could actually get 100 silver pieces in wool. If it's really desperate, maybe whatever this danger is, threatens his livelihood, his entire family, lives, maybe you could get I don't know if you would say 100, maybe, I don't know if you would, I'm trying to think of it would be, I guess you would say times 4, so you get 200 silver pieces in wool. And then if they just it's this, and then or otherwise there's nothing, then you can say, well, I'll get, maybe 400. I don't know, something like that. I guess it's times 2 times 2 times 4. Maybe you don't. Maybe if it meets the first two requirements, it's just everything. So probably it might be 200, or sorry, 100 for paid in land or goods, 100 if it's great danger, and if it's both, then it's 200, something like that. Anyway, you can use that chart however you'd like to figure out what kind of things they might offer. I like the idea of paying them not in cash too, paying them in different things. Think about heirlooms, things that might be in their family, right? Maybe the peasant has a small mirror that was given to them ages ago by a kindly noble for some service that their great 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 grandparents rendered, and maybe that mirror is worth 200 silver, right? But it's not something that the party can just melt down into ingots. Well, I suppose they could, but they'll have to take it and find a buyer, or even just giving them stuff like wool. And now they'll have to take that wool on market day and sell it, or find a reseller, or find a somebody willing to what do you do in those kind of vintage shops where you take it on? I forget what the term is, where you have stuff sold on your behalf, right? You have it sitting in somebody else's cart, and if they buy it if they buy them, then they pay you back for it. There's a name for it. I can't remember it. Then we get to renown, which is interesting. I've thought about using renown in my games. I know some folks use it in their games. I haven't read over World Without Numbers specific renown rules, because I don't think they're covering here. They're just talking about the rewards. But in any case, a basic game session is worth 1 point of renown. Terrence, consign. Thank you. Take that wool on consignment. Thank you. That's just one of the things with streaming. I can't stop to look in the dictionary, or just sit for 15 minutes and ponder until I find it. Nothing also got consignment. Thanks. Thank you both. Yep, consignment was the word. Basic game session is worth 1 point of renown for each PC, assuming they did something suitably adventurous or challenging during the evening's play. Their adventuring need not be entirely successful to get this basic point of renown. They just have to have done their best to accomplish something worth mentioning. The PCs have done a significant service to some local NPC, provided useful cooperation to a local authority, or done some notable feat of helpfulness to the populace. They each get an additional point of renown. If their adventure materially improved things for the locals or was helpful to the rulers, it's usually enough to get this bonus point. All right, so we got this concept of renown. Just put it on Sir Craig's list. Yes. Or Lady Angie's list. That's where you could put your listing for, we clean out giant rat infestations. Give us a positive review on Lady Angie's list. Absolutely. And now I think they just call it she got rid of the list, right? It's just Angie or something. They're just trying to, I guess, get it. It seems like all these companies, they start off being very super distinct and granular with their names, and then they make it more and more generic as it goes along. So Angie's List, I don't know who Angie was, and I don't even know what Angie's List was trying to say, but now it's just Angie. I don't know. It's like when sci-fi went from spelling their name like science fiction to just sci-fi. SYFY. I don't know. Or TLC was the learning channel, but now they're just TLC, and the TL and C don't mean anything. Remember the good old days? Pepperidge Farm remembers, and they weren't all good. Not even all that old. But I digress. Oh, no, nothing. Bringing us back on track. Unusual payment is a plot hook in itself. My PCs were paid with a warehouse load of cloth, of course. Then they forgot to pay taxes on it. Someone else claimed they owned it, etc. Lawyers got involved. Nice. That should be a new one. Instead of when orcs attack or something, it's when lawyers attack. When lawyers show up with paperwork. They ended up losing money. Oh, no. They loved it, but can't use it often. Yep. I mean, a lot of times the fun comes in all those misadventures. I think that's often misunderstood about D&D adventuring. especially among those who want to take away a lot of the failure points. It's oftentimes the stories you remember are not the ones where you succeeded, unless you succeeded with against the odds and with some real sense of flourish. It's all those times you goofed up and something crazy went wrong or someone did something ridiculous and you either recovered doing something equally crazy and ridiculous or it all came down in flames. So we got renown. I'm kind of curious what their renown mechanic is, but I don't want to break out now to try to find it. But we do have some ways to earn renown in a nice little table. You get one as a participation trophy. Basically, you show up in the game session and presumably you're not disruptive to this session. You get a point. You help local NPC, aid authorities, solve a local problem. You get a point. Ooh, spend 25% of the last adventure's reward on charity or carousing. That earns you another point. And then if you do something for free, you get a special, which we don't know. All right, now we get into experience point rewards. I don't know that I'm really super interested in this section just because, again, I'm looking at this as being generic and not about what Worlds Without Number does specifically in their system. Okay, going back to the chat, Taryn says, remember when you weren't paying close attention to how bad things were? Yeah, exactly. Remember when we were young and didn't care about some things? We could just watch Beavis and Butthead on the old MTV. Remember when MTV played music? Yeah, that kind of thing. Deathbringer Esquire, attorney at law, says Lincoln. Hey, Lincoln. Yep. That's when you know you're in trouble. When they don't come at you with swords, they come at you with scrolls. The quill is mightier than the sword. Okay, so we got some stuff on experience point rewards. I'm going to skip over that. Head straight to placing treasures. Yes. Adventurers have a habit of plunging into uncharted deeps, mysterious ruins, lost cities, fetid jungles, and similar places where large amounts of valuable objects may have been mislaid at some point, to put it nicely. Sometimes they are motivated by the rewards given by patrons, but often as not their own curiosity and avarice are the chief drivers. A GM will often be obliged to figure out what kind of loot might be found in a particular place. So below this nice text, we have a table with some silver piece values of the contents of certain sites. I'm not going to read through all of these and go through, but it looks like you're going to roll a 2d6, and then judging, you're going to pick the type of site. All right, so maybe I'll do this. So let me read through some of these types of sites just so we get some context here. So we're going to use this table, we would look at the type of site. We're not rolling randomly for this one. We're actually going to look at what we already have. So it might be a minor bandit cache or petty find, a gentry's estate, a significant ancient ruin, a merchant prince's estate, an ancient royal palace, a great temple, so on and so forth. And we would cross-reference that. It would be picking one of those rows from first column. And then we would roll 2d6, and we would cross-reference it with the columns. They're each divided into twos. So we have 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 10, 11 and 12. 6 to 8 is going to be those averages because the most commonly rolled numbers on 2d6 are 6, 7, and 8. 7 most of all. So you get some averages. So you get some nice stuff for silver piece values. It'd be nice then to be able to take those silver piece values and convert them into stuff, because often what I find is in the treasure tables, you just get a bunch of loot right in loose coin, and then you get, if there's magic treasure. But it would be interesting to have a table that if you started with, here's how much silver piece value you have, and let's turn that into a bunch of stuff. When they open up Tutankhamun's tomb, it wasn't here's just a bunch of gold coins and silver coins or ingots. It was, here are these statuettes. Here are these beautiful painted figures. Here is a gold death mask. Here are these canoptic jars, right? All these beautiful, wonderful, valuable treasure. So it would be nice to be able to say, I got 10,000 silver pieces, and I could use that on some table to say, that's X amount of, maybe it's some of these jars, some of these things, some of these scrolls, some death mask, candlesticks, richly inlaid goblets, stuffed pets, maybe a couple of stuffed retainers or two, right? You bury them with their lord. Lord died, so you bury a couple of butlers with them, that kind of thing. I mean, I don't know how much someone would pay for a stuffed mummy butler. Maybe there's a market. I mean, certainly if it's animated, there would probably be more of a market. But if it's just stuffed, you never know. People are strange like that. Who was it that bought the bones of Michael Jackson's chimp? Didn't that get auctioned off for some crazy amount of money? Okay, now they divide it up. We get some more tables, first of all. One is for chances of a magic item. We do have one for types of jewelry, types of magic item, valuable objects or precious goods, and then you can roll to see why an object is valuable. So these are great. But I think the one thing here that's interesting is that I would love if some of these were you rolled on them for those amounts. 20,000 silver, then roll 2 times on this table, once on this table, once on that table, kind of thing. I don't know that these. I don't know if I really. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to. Types of jewelry I think are fairly standard. Types of magic items are pretty much standard. I think the two more interesting tables, and someone can correct me if they feel like one of these other tables is worthy of closer examination. I think the two I'm just going to rattle through because it seems the most interesting and the most things that might not be covered in ye old OSR or whatever rulebook are the valuable objects or precious goods, which it doesn't give values for. They're just valuable. So you can decide maybe how valuable they are. Maybe given if you've rolled up certain silver piece totals, right? Again, 10,000. Maybe you decide some of the stuff is worth however much percent of that 10,000 silver. And then the other table is why is it valuable? So as far as the precious goods or valuable objects, we have stuff about spices, drugs, household goods, coffers, casks, and containers that are jeweled, just uncut or unset jewels, ingots of rare precious metals, statues or figurines, religious tokens, the kind of stuff I actually mentioned a minute ago. And then we get the other table about why they might be valuable. It's contraband. The gemstones are strange. It's made of a really weird, unearthly material. This workmanship is superlative. Chef's kiss. It's got a famous maker's mark on it. It's a prized trophy. Something of that sort. And then, we get into domains. Domains. I do so much want to do this, but let me take a look at how long this is, because if it's, I guess it's only a couple pages. All right. Hopefully this won't bleed too much into the next section, but I really do want to see what he's got to say about domains. So it doesn't seem to be that much. It must be kind of broad level because it's only 2 pages. First, the intro. It's not uncommon for heroes to come into noble titles as rewards for their adventuring or to seize de facto control of some stretch of wilderness, and most such newly minted lords want to know what such a promotion is worth to their purse. Right? So you inherited some land or you've taken it. People want to know, how much is it worth? What can I get out of it? And this naturally leads us into getting and improving property. Actually, acquiring land and titles is generally the product of adventuring that may come as an addition or substitute for some monetary reward. Rulers are notorious for handing off the most wretched, dangerous, worthless parts of their claimed lands to adventurers. They're ideally equipped for handling abnormal dangers, and if they fail, no one of importance will be lost. It's not unknown for kings to hand over disputed territories to such heroes, trusting in them to make the royal writ run there despite the rival claims of their foes. Boy, that's a little tongue twister. Royal writ run. Make the royal writ run despite rivals. Say that a few times fast. The next paragraph I'm going to read because it talks about how much land they might get. To determine how much land a ruler might give as a reward in lieu of cash, assume that a full 6-mile hex of wilderness with only marginal agricultural value is as good as 5,000 silver worth of cash reward. I like that. I probably wouldn't make it hex shaped. You need want to see the natural, use the natural contours of things. But I do like the idea of looking at basically saying that a 6 mile hex of wilderness worth about 5,000 silver, and that's assuming that it's got very little agricultural value. It is not an agricultural breadbasket. If the Lord is granting existing farming villages, business monopolies, or other personal estates, a grant is the cash equivalent of a reward 20 times the size of its yearly income. Thus, a market village that generates 1,000 silver of profit a year is generally considered a fair equivalent to a 20,000 silver reward. These are all good things. I wish they would put. The one thing I wish is they could put this in a table, not to roll on, but just to be able to visually see it. They can almost combine it with the earlier table they had of those rewards for doing things and have these alternates. But that's excellent rules to have in the back of your brain somewhere that you could just use to start ballparking. If it's going to be a giant, significant reward in that 50,000 or range, or like here they said 20,000, then you might look at, okay, well maybe that is equivalent to a village. Is there a village that fits the bill? Or is there some massive amount of land that's barely usable, if usable at all, that would be worthwhile for them to give over? So it's good to have those numbers. PCs with spare cash in hand might actively look for land to buy from a noble or grandee in need of quick money. And the PCs are going to tend to have a lot of money, and if the question is, well, what can I spend it on? Land. Land is a good one. Whole hexes of wilderness terrain might be sold at the prices noted above, or specific farms, businesses, and granges might be purchasable at 20 times their yearly income. Better prices are not impossible for PCs who perform suitably useful favors for the seller, and some independent landowners might voluntarily enter the party's service if they can provide much needed protection and security. So if the local lord is either absentee, maybe doesn't exist, maybe you stumble on a freehold or something out that's kind of running under the radar of the kingdom or empire or whatever at large, but one thing they don't have a lot of is protection. Maybe you can offer that protection and get a stake. Probably not a true sort of feudal relationship, since technically your claim won't stand up in some kind of court, but as far as day-to-day workings, it would work just fine. Or you can turn it all in for a dried king's liver. Dried king's liver. A nice pate with a side of Chianti. Right? Yes. Nothing wrong with some dried king's liver. Well, why not have it wet? Why dried? I like to be able to smear it a little bit. You got to get a nice smear on that bagel with that dried king's liver. Needs a little wetness. Otherwise, it'll just crumble. And you don't like that. You don't want crumbly liver. It's not good for anybody. Farm and business income. Oh, Frederick Ork. Welcome, Frederick. Put some sriracha sauce on it. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I like sriracha. I'm not actually a big liver fan myself, but something tells me, I don't know that sriracha would be the thing, but I'd be welcome to try it. Actually, probably would help me because I don't like the taste of liver so much. So to get over that taste, to dump some sriracha on it so I just don't taste the liver at all might be just what I would need. PCs who aren't the lords of full 6-mile hex-sized domains might still own some valuable farmland or working business. Other great nobles might own extensive personal estates in addition to their tax rights over a hex or more of land. While these rules aren't meant to be a full-scale treatment of fantasy business, they provide a simplified framework for these personal estates. Note that it's assumed that the PCs will have acquired workers and lieutenants of ordinary competence and loyalty, and that day-to-day matters will be handled by these reeves. If a problem arises, as indicated by the dice, the PCs might need to step in, but keeping and administering these holdings isn't usually meant to eat up much playtime at the table. Unless you want to do a birthright-style campaign, which you may have domain turns mixed in there somewhere, maybe seasonally with your adventuring. But you can find the balance that works for you and your tables and your table and your players. Be nice to know what the income they think one of those marginally valuable 6 mile hexes would create. Though, if a 1,000 silver a year market town is worth 20,000, so it's basically 20 times, maybe we divide by 20. So that 5,000 silver piece hotel ends up being, 5,000 silver piece valuable hex ends up, if it's developed, maybe delivering, I don't know, what is that, 250 silver a year? Oh, we got some more comments in the chat. Let's see. Nothing chimes in. In the real world, monarchs gave weird monopolies as a reward, like a monopoly on importing matches. Example from my game, a lord gave the players the right to harvest water birds from half a lake. If I was going to take that, I would say I want to harvest the water birds from the top half of the lake. Let somebody else try to harvest water birds from the depths. I'll take those at the surface. Ha ha! Birdman! Fooled you all. Yeah, that's fair. And it would be cool to come up with some interesting and strange monopolies. And then what can the players do with that? If they do have a monopoly on matchsticks or something like that, what can they do with it? Frederick says there's a king in history who ate so many of his favorite cakes he died at the table. I believe it. Terrence, yep. Yep, just hitting my math. 250 silver, yep. Something like that. So yeah, I mean, you can figure it out. I always like if they're gonna. I really like the idea of them giving the values and what the earnings are, but just complete the circuit, right? Give me the earnings. If you say, hey, we might get this hex of land, tell me how much that hex of land is basically worth. But probably as a good shorthand, just using that divide the reward by 20 to get the yearly income. All right, now we get some noble income. For very minor lords and gentry, their yearly income is worth only what their farmland and the serfs or tenant farmers on it can generate, as noted in the farm and business income section. For lords that rule at least 1 6-mile hex of land, or about 30 square miles, they usually have not only the profits of their personal estates, but assorted fees, scots, tariffs, feorms, mercies, donations, tithes, and gifts that amount to a varying sum based on how developed and safe the land is, as indicated below. War-ravaged urban heartlands may be less profitable than peaceful frontiers, and the overall development and security of the hex is of great importance. Yep, that definitely makes sense. Some hexes will have minor or major cities in them, which greatly increases their value. Note that while hexes with cities in them can be very profitable, this assumes that the noble actually has taxation rights there, and that it's not a free city or under direct royal rule. That's the case, such a hex is worth no more than the densely developed hexes with a ×2 multiplier. All right, so we get these tables here, some hex types, and some income per year. So this is what I was asking for before, and lo and behold, they deliver. Though interesting, their math is not the same as what would have been thought of. So we had thought that maybe that poorly and barely habitable hex, that starting hex that you gave out for instead of a 5,000 silver piece reward, we thought when it's at that point where it's barely useful, it's just at the very bare end of being farmable, arable land, you maybe get 250 silver a year. But in this case, the income actually is 1,000 silver per year. And of course, if we just want to use that divide by 20 math, we can ignore this at our pleasure or tweak it at our pleasure. Marginal crop raises that to 2,000 a year. If it's rich agricultural land, 5,000 a year. If it has a major mine or rare resource, 10,000 a year. Frederick Gork says, that famous German knight with one hand that took taxing the road a little too far. Yes. Yeah, a lot of cases of people taking taxation too far or just getting too deep into their own avarice. And we have some multipliers here for population levels. Obviously, if it's totally uninhabited, you multiply by 0. It's barely inhabited, you're going to multiply it by 0.1, which would get us much closer to that, right? So you'd go from 1,000 down to 100. If it's frontier population density, 0.5. Backwater is just 1. Dense villages and market towns, you multiply by 2, and then by 4, and then by 10 when you get to a major city. And we also get multipliers for security. And I'm not going to go through all those, but obviously goes from stuff where in levels at 0, where it's actively dangerous, war is ongoing, to a 2 multiplied by 2 if it's unusually safe and orderly. And then we also have another section here, the owner's perquisites. Being a lord or a landowner comes with inevitable benefits, but most of these are wrapped up in the profit produced by the fee for holding. The services and work performed by subjects or tenants should be billed at the usual rate against the holding's income, and if it's inadequate, the PCs will need to bring some of their own money to the table, or else the locals will be too busy looking after their own survival to be of much use. I.e., right, this is not your net profit, but your gross income. So you will take from these things however much money it takes to actually run the hex or the businesses or whatever it is, and then you'll figure out what their take home is. Lords who want more reliable or elaborate benefits from their holdings should purchase buildings and hirelings from the major project section pages. So yeah, you want more, you want it to run more smoothly, you want to squeeze the money out, then hire some folk to help you do that. Lordship may also come with more abstract benefits, such as the right to rule on legal cases or the privilege of direct audiences. Please don't do prima nocte like you're playing Braveheart the game. Don't be gross. Let's keep it nice. I suppose if your whole table wants to be gross, be as gross as your table allows, but no, don't. Just don't. Please, just don't. At least don't tell me about it. I don't want to hear it. Nobody put it in the chat, please, if you've done some kind of gross, fantasy tropes, bad things from bad movies. Please don't. But if you are thinking about doing it, make sure your table's down with that stuff first. Obligations of ownership. The profits of personal estates and businesses take into account the customary taxes and duties owed the land's ultimate lord. No extra payment need normally be made to the overlord. Though times of great strife or exceptionally rapacious rulers might be a different matter. A roll of 1 on the yearly peril die. Ooh, there's a yearly peril die. Might mean the king has laid a special tax on the land, and only a special favor can get him to lift the exaction. Okay. So these do take into account that you've already paid your dues to the king. All right. Or whoever it is above you. And then Terrence says, it's so weird that don't be gross has to be said so often. Yes, it does. But you know what? It bears being said. Yes, I do feel incumbent sometimes. Hey, yeah, don't be gross. I know everyone's version of gross is different, and people will say, oh, well, my table is all my friends. I know that I'm sure in junior high, middle school, high school, probably. I think by college, I don't remember really anything gross things happening. I'm sure that I was at tables where gross stuff was done, but be better than we were in our youth. Don't be gross. And if you're thinking about it, like I said, ask your table first. And if you start to see people making that kind of face, like, oh, please don't say what we think you're about to say, just don't. Save everybody the heartache. Just don't do it. Think about something else. Come up with a different joke. And that is it. So I want to wait to do handling wealth. Whoa, went too far. Since we're running up the hour, these land ownership and domains is actually really good. I like it. It doesn't get into the nitty gritty of stuff but you can find this stuff in other books. And I don't know enough of his thought process with this to say that, okay, he's not giving you all the price lists for how to build a citadel. Maybe they just figure, well, you're going to have another book that's going to give you all the prices on all the building equipment, which is in stuff like OD&D has a whole bunch of prices for different elements of castle superstructure. I'm sure there are other books that have tons of that stuff in there. So this is a very, in a way, abstracted view, but it gives you a lot of stuff that I think is useful. It's hidden a little bit in the text, and that's why I wouldn't mind if they broke this stuff in some tables for more easy referencing. So when I'm looking for how much is that hex, if I want to give somebody a hex, how much is it? There's no table for that. I'd have to look and see it in the text. But it's really good. I think we're right about the hour, so it's a good spot to end it. Any final thoughts on the chats? We covered some good ground here today. A few short sections I also wonder, would it be helpful to folks if I broke out some of these sections, much like I do with the OSR Reddit roundups, where I will break things up into specific topics? It's occurred to me that I'm now on 8 parts, and I'm not even sure when I'm going to be finally finished. 10, 12, 15, never. If people would find it helpful for me to take some of these, because right now in YouTube, they're just under these very blanket, non-descriptive headings of just Worlds Without Number part 876. Not very helpful. A couple of the sections, I tried to keep it so that each section ends when I end the session, the stream. There might be one or two, I think, earlier on where there were really long sections and I had to break it, but I could bring those two together, merge it, and just have one that covers, say, this section. Or for example, today's stream had 3 or 4 sections, breaking them up into the individual sections. You think folks would like that? You think that would be useful to people? That might be more of something that's easier to reference than trying to figure out, if you wanted to, where in 10 or 50 1-hour streams some bit of coverage was. Let me know. You don't need to let me know now. If you don't have an opinion now, you can let me know later in the comments section, or on Facebook or Twitter, or wherever you can find me. Before everybody bails out of here, I'm gonna hang out a couple more minutes in case anyone's got any questions or comments to field. I'll throw my Twitter handle back up there. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at HexPressman, or I'm in a bunch of different places. I try to put links and different things in the video descriptions and elsewhere so you can find me, but there it is. That works out. Let me know if there's some different ways you want to surface it. Also, a reminder that at the end of this whole thing, wherever I decide to call it quits on this, we are going to do a project that hopefully we'll work on all together, which will be converting the movie Logan's Run into some sort of micro setting or setting using mostly tools from Worlds Without Number. Maybe when we get into it, we will expand and use tools from other books, other sources. Not sure yet. So the one, say, homework assignment maybe is to watch Logan's Run. I know it's based on a book, and someone commented, I forget, a little while ago, that the book is very different from the films. I understand that. I'm sure the book is superior to the movie. As much as I love the movie, the books usually are better, but we're going to stick with the movie, and we're going to look at how we can use the tools in Worlds Without Number and potentially some other sources to turn that into a usable setting. So find Logan's Run. It's been on my list to actually track down what streaming service it's on. I'm assuming it's on somewhere. It's a fairly popular, well-known, well-thought of sci-fi movie from the 70s. So I just have in my imagination that it's on some service, but I haven't actually looked. So I don't know. So if it's not on a service, somebody let me know. If you found it on Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, HBO Max, wherever, let me know. Hopefully everybody can have a chance to watch it, or at least try to, before we get there. And that way we can have it fresh in our minds. I definitely need to watch it again. Want to take some notes, kind of get at least some of the ground stuff ready. John Lennon says, Dogs in the Vineyard has a great conflict resolution system designed for social situations. Maybe we should check that. I do want to check out Dogs in the Vineyard. I think that was taken out of print and circulation, though. I think I actually have it. I think I got it sometime way long ago. I'm meaning to give it another look. But I think for some reasons, which I don't remember or recall, they decided to pull that one. I don't know if that meant they were going to try to come out with another version, or if it's just gone. So I don't know. But yeah, if I have it, maybe I'll try to look it up at some point. If you're going to go into this much detail just by Pendragon, yeah, I mean, Pendragon's, I have one of those systems that I have multiple versions of. Still have never really played it, but I just pine over wanting to play it. Yes, Pendragon or Harn will have a lot of resources if you want to get super into the nitty gritty, and definitely on the low magic or no magic side of the spectrum. But you want to get resources on things like that. Yeah, Harn, source books, Pendragon has a lot of stuff. I've often thought how I could take some of the elements in Pendragon and move them into the OSR, make them more OSR friendly, because there's a lot to Pendragon. It's a different kind of game. Sometimes it feels like you really are playing accounting the game. I still really want to play it or run it at some point. But I think there's some useful things that maybe we could do in an OSR sense, drawing inspiration, drawing some of the elements from Pendragon and just making them a little bit less or more abstracted than they are. That'll be a challenge for another day. Anyhow, I'm through. Have a great rest of your day, night, weekend when you're watching or listening to this. And I'll see you for the next one. I guess part 9 is incoming. And after that, the Logan's Run project. Cheers, everybody. Game on. And I'll talk to you